Hello, everyone. Sorry for the delay here. We had a couple of technical difficulties, but I think we're ready to start. I'm going to start with a little introduction here. So my name is Jenna Ringelheim. I'm the National Program Director of the Environmental Leadership Program. ELP is a national nonprofit organization that provides leadership training and professional development to emerging and innovative environmental and social change leaders from academia, business, government, and the nonprofit sectors. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Environmental Leadership Program's webinar series, an online platform to expand your knowledge through the expertise of ELP fellows on a diverse range of environmental and social change topics. For a full list of upcoming webinars and to learn more about our professional development programs, please visit our website at elpnet.org. We invite you to actively participate in today's program by asking questions via the chat function on your screen or by raising your hand. So let's get started. We'll basically have about 20 minutes to do this presentation, 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll have some time to go back and forth. So I'd like to welcome Mieko Ozeki to the call today.
Hi. Whoops. Hi, everyone. Whoops. I'm going to get ahead of myself here. My name is Mieko Ozeki, and I am the Sustainability Projects Coordinator at the University of Vermont, and I am a 2011 ELP Senior Fellow. And part of the reason I'm been interested in doing this presentation on personal branding is because how it relates with career and personal management, and particularly my interest is in the tools that we utilize to project those our personal brands. And Jenna, why are you interested in personal branding?
Hmm. Yeah, so personal branding is definitely a topic that we get to discuss a lot at ELP. For me, I'm really interested in how you as an individual can um, express your essence. So share all the things that are uniquely you, both in your personal and professional life.
All right. So we want to cover. Sorry about that. So just basically, in terms of personal branding, it seems like it's a really new term, but and it's just a recent trend. But it's actually the concept has been around for ages, I think. But for the most part, the pivotal moment about personal branding came about in the 90s, just when the tech boom was happening, and we've started to transition from upward mobility and vertical movement in organizations to very much the individual, and the movement is not neither horizontal or vertical, but that you had to kind of be your own personal brand, and uh, basic in order to get hired, to be recognized for within your positions. And so an article back in 1997 came out by Tom Peters, and he reflected about personal branding first by looking at how corporations were branding themselves, and when at the time we're looking at Nike shoes and a couple of other things, and recognizing that everyone is branded. We're wearing all those clothes, we wear all those symbols, and so applying those same concepts to the individual, how do we kind of get people to remember our personal brands? And so this is a kind of a pivotal article that kicked this kind of thought process out. So kind of why is it important? Why is personal branding important now? So we didn't really hear about it in the early 2000s, but until after that article. But why is it is a big deal? Well, personal branding has always existed to some degree. Our reputation management has always started with initially with word of mouth, through writing and books. Maybe we're sharing our thoughts about other people through a phone or television, but then we greatly accelerated in probably in the 90s due to the internet. We started to have an opportunity to advertise individually. It wasn't just the realm of corporations that had the power to for those communication modes. So now we could create websites. We can create our own messages through not only our web pages, but also through our emails. Every day we're kind of in our emails representing ourselves and our abilities through our email messaging. And that quickly propelled to things like blogging, services. People are expressing their opinions. It's not just us relying on experts in news agencies to do so. And then probably I would say mid 2000s, this is when, with Facebook and the growth of social media, it has greatly grown in terms of how we manage our personal brand in recent years. And with smartphones and all the other technologies, we have to manage our personal identities everywhere, because anyone could snap a picture, record your voice, post it anywhere. And that is kind of why personal branding is a big deal now. So, what is a personal brand? So, personal brand is kind of really about what people's perception of you is. It's not just only a reflection of your internally a reflection of yourself, but it's what how people perceive you. And so, as I said, it's about you, and it's also about building trust, and particularly building the trust that people have about your own brand and who you are. It's building what Tom Peters has said was building up a trust bank. So here's a little bit more formal definition that was recently written. But basically, personal branding is a perception or emotion maintained by somebody other than you that describes your outstanding qualities and influences that person's relationship with you. Um, so basically, it's kind of that one-to-one relationship. But we're also going to be talking about the one-to-many and the one-to-many of kind of the digital strangers that we represent, and by representing ourselves. So our intent for this session is to talk about getting people to think about two ways of looking at personal branding. First is to um, think about how do you project your brand to others in person, and then to think about how do you project your brand to a digital public. And as I said, there's perfect strangers in the digital world, also as well as familiar people. But how do you project who you are?
So, we wanted to get started here with this quote that I just absolutely love, which is "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken." I think in general, when we think about personal branding or we hear that word, many people have an aversion to it because of its association with advertising or other business related things. But I think what I really like to dispel about personal branding is the act of personal branding is really an exercise at getting to know yourself better and to focus in on the things that are uniquely you. So it's not about necessarily, well, it can be, I guess, about who you want to be in the future. But it's not about, creating a facade or creating, some sort of image that isn't uniquely you, but it's really about understanding more about yourself. So, and why is this important? So, first encounters are really important, if you can imagine. There are studies that show that the first impression is usually made in less than 30 seconds with people that you meet, and that it can take 20 new interactions to change this first impression. So, why is this important as we're leaders going out into the world trying to make a difference? Well, I think it matters really importantly. And so, there's lots of things that go into this first encounter, and thinking about how it is you want to carry yourself, how it is that you want to um, introduce yourself, and all that. So, how do you figure out what that is? How do you determine what is uniquely you as a personal brand? Here at ELP, we do a variety of different exercises through our training program. And this little slide here is kind of a joke about one of the exercises that we do at our retreats, where you actually get a group of people together and get feedback. So you literally write on a Post-it note, what are the words that describe me? What are the words that represent who I uniquely am? And this is an exercise that you can do at a dinner party with a group of your friends. You can do it via email. But in general, the process is to get feedback from other people about how it is that they already see you, and see if that matches up with the image that you want to carry out and take forth into the world.
Next one.
Yeah. So, in general, I also like to think about this term of being the CEO of your own career. So, often when we use identifiers or when we use introductions with other people, we say our name and we say our organization and the title that we currently carry. And although that's certainly very appropriate in certain settings, I really like to push people to think more broadly about who it is that they are, and what it is that they represent out into the world. And that might not always align with your current occupation. So, being the CEO of your own career is thinking again about all those various things that make you uniquely you. And there's a lot of really wonderful resources out there to help you in this endeavor. One of the books here that's called Business Model You goes through almost like a business business plan process where you could kind of write out all the things that are important to you. So the things that you want to do in the world, the people that you want to be working with, that type of stuff. But personal branding in general, I think, is strongest when you connect it back to the work that you want to do in the world and how you want to make a difference. And making sure that the way that other people see you is the way that you want to walk in the world.
Perfect. So we're kind of bridging over between a lot of it. Personal branding focuses on the career management component. So how do we project ourselves within our careers and professional lives? But in a lot of ways, that line is becoming a little bit blurry because it connects with our personal identities, and how do we also project that into the world? So obviously, we have both our groups of friends as well as our colleagues, and sometimes we can be able to distinguish like one set of values and identity from the other, but a lot of it is blended. And particularly in this digital age, brand management really looks at the whole, so it is both the professional and the personal. So this is something, probably a phrase everyone's heard, but I don't know if everyone's done. But have you Googled yourself? And I like this quote that actually Jenna pulled about personal branding. It is amazing in this digital age how much access people have to information about us, and whether you intentionally put it out there or if you um, basically are intentional about putting out information about yourself, whether that's doing a publication or stating opinion, or there's a photo or something. There's bound to be somewhere information is tagged about you. And a lot of times now we've become, because a lot of us with smartphones, we're all self-reporting in terms of our interaction in the world, and then reporting it out to the digital world. So if you Google yourself, sometimes people are really surprised what they find. But for the most part, it's actually something that a lot of people do. So not only just in personal life are people Googling other people's names, but it's also employers are doing that. Um, and just this is my, actually had to tie this in, but one of my quick tips is that in Googling yourself, one of the important things about any of these search engines, when you Google yourself, is most people only pay attention to the first page of results. And so generally the according to the algorithms that are set up, if you have buy your own domain name, and you maybe create a kind of a temporary website, or if you don't, that actually your domain name is the first thing that will usually come up on the first page. So for instance, if you get a domain name, actually, I have my own domain name, which is miekozeki.com, and that actually always turns up on the first page. And the only reason I started to do it was because I realized that when suddenly, like a movie star or somebody comes up into the kind of paparazzi and basically people buy their names and create all kinds of content about that person. And so you want to get ahead of that in terms of being able to manage your identity by not letting others take it. So that's what my recommendation is. Either go to something like GoDaddy and buy your domain name just to make it easy. Um, So the reason why I also ask is that not everyone has a social media profile, but so there's the range. There's the social media profiles that you set up on social networks like Facebook or LinkedIn, but there's also the other kinds of information are out that might be out there is maybe you've done a publication or you've worked with an organization or you've presented in another place. Your name will pop up in different places. But in this page, this part of the presentation, I wanted to talk about your social media profile. So when you create a social media profile, you kind of want to be attentive to what content you supply. So for instance, you want to pick when you do add your picture, depending on which site, so I'm picking here LinkedIn, you want to pick a profile picture that is obviously appropriate for your professional network. Um, and you want to maintain that content over time. Always want to either refresh your image or your taglines. Um, Also, you want to be very mindful of all the security settings that are on for each of your profiles, just to be assured, you can get alerted when people mention you, or you can be alerted about certain changes in your content. Um, those are things you should probably pay a lot of attention to right after you have created your profile. The other thing that you want to be attentive to is, depending on which social network you're working with, is what what who are your followers, and who are your friends and all that stuff, and maintaining lists. So in LinkedIn, you have the choice to accept people's invitations, as well as in Facebook, where the only difference is that in Facebook you can create different lists, and this will be important later on, especially if you're posting. That you could create different lists to send out your different posts or status reports or things that you want to share with people. Whereas LinkedIn, it's people can still see your profile, but if the value in LinkedIn is your connections. And then something like Twitter, anyone can follow you, and so you'll want to monitor that. So once you create like a social media profile, and this is something in general actually has a great application, whether you're doing your own personal social media profiles or you're monitoring your organizations or your office, because a lot of organizations kind of get plugged into different social networks. But one of the things I got into practice in my own office and then for myself is starting a list of all of your social media profiles, and that will include everything from your username and passwords, and just getting an idea of when you started those memberships or when you closed them out. Um, and then noting what kind of posts that you share with these profiles. So in my mind, I always know that when I do LinkedIn, I'm always going to post one of my recent professional portfolio and all the work that I've done up to date. Or with Twitter, I don't send nearly as many messages, but I do share a lot of articles that are related to my field. And as Facebook, I think about it in terms of depending on how I split my groups into my friends list, I think about kind of who am I talking, in terms of my friends. I'm obviously either talking to friends or classmates or people I know. And so basically just being conscious of that, because they're different communication tools to share information as well as your brand. And then as this, when you're doing that inventory, what should you count? So in addition to social media profiles, you really should also count on all of your anything that you can think of where your bio is brought up. So for me, it's my office website, as well as I know I have a profile on ELP's website and a couple of other places. And so I always kind of want to monitor or see how much control I have of updating that content. Um, so because anywhere your name is mentioned and in those Google search, it will find all of those pages. And and with that said too, is that thinking about any of your publications and pictures, presentations, those are your name will also come up. So on Facebook, it's your choice, but you want to be careful about how your picture is being how you're being tagged in pictures. So you will want to detag yourself or keep pictures in a certain way, but you just want to monitor all that. So, how is your personal brand viewed in the digital world? So, I actually have, as leading up to this presentation, I've had some really interesting instances, but actually, a couple days ago, I had a colleague email me about a potential candidate for a fellowship. And she found this person and was also on my LinkedIn profile and just wanted to know what I knew about that person. And so before we used to have reference checks, we still have reference checks via kind of paper and calling up people, but social media makes it even faster. People will Google or they'll look in your LinkedIn profile and see who you're connected with. And that could be a good thing, and as well, just making you're always trying to get an idea of who the candidate is. And so this is kind of a subtle way that people do it. But as I said, in this example, uh, my colleague had asked me about this individual. I actually knew very little. I knew a little bit about the individual, but uh, it was it was interesting that this request kind of came up just before doing this webinar. So just think about, this is sometimes the kind of messaging that happens out there as a result of your profile or somebody looking for information about you. And as I was saying, the wall, for your personal brand, you want to monitor and track that your what's going on on the web and in terms of what information is out there about you. So there are a few services that do this, and basically these kind of services, what they do is they analyze all of your different social media profiles as well as kind of what information comes up when they do kind of it's a personal version of a Google Analytics of, what if anyone's familiar about Google Analytics looks at websites and looks at how often people look at different pages on websites. And so it applies the same algorithm in looking at how many times people look up your name and where are people clicking the most. And so I signed myself up. So there's a couple companies, and I signed myself up to one that's called brandyourself.com. And the reason I did it was actually I learned about this a couple years ago from reading some articles on Mashable, which is an online web magazine. And the brandyourself.com came about from a bunch of students from Syracuse developed this product because one of the co-founders he was applying for all these internships, and he was starting to realize that no one was responding back to his application, and he was kind of curious. So he Googled himself, and I think he had a common name. And so when he Googled himself, even though in spite of all of the stuff he worked on and developing his own content and about himself, he found that on the first page was a link about somebody with the same name but had a arrest record. And obviously, he figured this was probably why no one was contacting him. And so they developed a product where you can track, look at all of your links and also monitor who's been looking at your profile, as well as it helps you develop a profile so that when it comes up, when people Google you, that they can find all of that information, the links and publications, anything that you want people to look at comes up first on the first page. So this on the right, an example is this is the dashboard of kind of all the search results about me and all the links that I have posted of my work. And they also just train you about how do you get your name Googled, Googleable basically, and so that you're and how it should appear in your social media. And they give some really good advice. It's also a reasonably cost service, but um, this is an example. But the cheap and free way though is monitoring, tracking your reputation, and just kind of going through and Googling every so often and looking at your profile on all your different social media profiles and tracking all that. Um, One of the things that's interesting too about I think recently about Facebook is that you can also get an idea how many people are looking at your profile, as well as LinkedIn recently had started that service where you can see who recently looked at your profile. So just to closing out, here are a couple of resources. They're ever since this social media boom, the from the 1997 article that Tom Peters wrote about personal branding, kind of as a trickling of resources are out there, but basically by around 2005, there's been an explosion of books and pointers talking about how to manage your personal brand, particularly in the digital age, but how, first developing the message that you want everybody to hear. So here's a couple of resources that we had in mind. And I'm just going to finish out here. So we just want to thank everyone for attending. I'm sure there's a lot of questions about managing your personal brand, whether in person or whether on social media. But I hope you get to learn more about ELP and all its offerings, and check out the website.
Great. Thank you, Mieko. We do have some interesting questions to get us
Sweet.
started. And if anyone else has questions, please just enter them into the chat box and we'll shoot them over to Mieko. So Ome asks, are there ways to delete material that you prefer not to show up in Google searches?
No, actually. Unfortunately not. The way you do it is really, and this is one of the advice of Brand Yourself, .com, is that you try putting out there as many positive links about yourself, and so it basically pushes everything uh, down into like a second page, which is where I think when people look, it's like there's like a 100% look at the first page results, and then it kind of really dwindles over time. So the way I look at it, I mean, hopefully there isn't any negative link information about you, but what you try doing is one of the things that they suggest is if, like, let's say I utilize different services to post my content, so whether it's presentations or things like or different pictures or something like that, I make sure that I put my full name on it, and then basically I post it. And what you try doing is through your social networks, calling attention to it so that there's more clicks to it, which when there's more clicks to those links, then those are the things that are going to be on the first page of the Google search.
Great. Christy asks, what if your name isn't super unique? Should you
Mm.
be doing all these things that you mentioned?
Um, yeah, I know. I mean, I think it is difficult for somebody who doesn't have a unique name, but then I think it's about how do you create whether maybe a unique tagline for yourself or a unique domain, but you get people to click it and then recognize your name. So for instance, if you have Jane Smith as your name, then what you could do is either distinguish yourself by saying it's it's Jane D. Smith, and so hopefully distinguishing from all other Jane Smiths. But it's really first not only just the name, but it's also what are the keywords, and this goes back to kind of the personal branding, what are the keywords that people associate with you? So for instance, if you are you're really you're Jane Smith and you're really good at project managing conferences, people can probably, when they do their search, like if they first try Jane Smith, they find too many Jane Smiths, so they might go Jane Smith project manager, and then that might call up results. And so you want to make sure you have content that says out there, Jane Smith project manager works on XYZ projects, but basically have that people, all the keywords associated with your name come up, and it basically calls up just those particular searches.
Great. So Mieko, Kate asks about Google Plus. She says that she's familiar with many of these other tools that you mentioned, but with Google Plus and some of the newer social
Mm-hmm.
networks that are coming online, is it worth adding a profile everywhere?
Huh. Um, I hesitate to say it. Like I have a Google Plus as well, and I think you need to be able to manage how many profiles are out there about you. And so I don't recommend having too many profiles. So if you don't feel like you're gonna, and it's also about based on like how much you're really gonna use it, and you know, right now where Google Plus is, a lot of us know friends who have Gmail and all that stuff, but we don't. Not all of them are signed up to Google Plus. So I think it's, I think really I would, you know, I would basically select very, thinking about, I would select only a handful of um, social networking platforms to get, to get your message out or to be part of. Because if you go beyond a handful, then it's just too many to keep track of.
Great. One question we have here, Miko, is about more specifically your own journey in this endeavor, and what has changed as you've started to take control of your own personal brand.
Sure. Um, so actually, I mean, the I actually thank Jenna because a couple of years ago, Jenna came in and did a workshop on personal branding, and she did that whole post-it note thing. And I've always thought about, kind of those, what do we project in terms of our identity for quite a while, but to put a label to it was really intriguing to me. And Jenna pointed to a lot of resources, and so that got me really thinking. And and it really got me thinking is because I work in a university setting, so I'm recognizing a couple of things for myself. One is I grew up and went to college at a time when the internet was just kind of out and booming, and so developing your own web page was like felt like a struggle, but like you still wanted to get your we were starting to put resumes and create our own websites to do that, to get people to recognize that we're out there. And then basically with the social media part, I kind of started thinking about it a little bit, and realizing how, if how out of control your personal brand can get with these tools if you don't manage it well. Uh, and now that I work with college students, which I find very interesting. A lot of them are just becoming aware, I think, of how these tools, the capacity of these tools. It's both exciting and gets people involved with stuff, but at the same time, it could also, it could be damaging. And for me, I feel fortunate I've been be able to mediate between what is a tool and what is and understanding the content versus, when I look at it, the students I work with, they can't really differentiate the tool plus the content that they put out there. And so when I talk to my interns, I'm going, well, you got to really think about, you're about to graduate, you really need to clean up all of your Twitter and anything that any social media you use, and then anything else. I try getting to think about, like, let's put some more positive results, like your successes in terms of your projects or things that you do. And that's because also my other interest is in professional portfolio development and getting people to develop content that to show off the content about that of their skills. And so that these are just the mechanisms to do it, and I'm trying to push for people's awareness about where their successes and what they can provide for a larger community.
That's great. We have one more question, and any additional questions, please put them in the chat box. We're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. Um, but there was a question in relation to the divide or the connection, I guess, between both the personal and professional
Mm.
identity online. And in a world where you might have a Twitter account and it starts as a personal one, but then you start to have more professional people follow you. What are some tools and techniques that you can use to keep the lines a little bit more less blurred, I guess?
Mm. Yeah, and as I said, it's pretty complicated. A lot of it is then I would say, if you start to find, well, it could go either way. So if you start to find, like, on um, on on your professional feed, which is your Twitter, or your LinkedIn, that you're finding that you're getting people that you don't feel comfortable are following you. I, I would suggest leading people to setting up a different profile that's more about the professional version of you, or this is the personal version of you. Um, it means monitoring your identities, but basically you want to make sure that you are consistent about what is the messaging you use with each one of those profiles or identities that you use. Um, and that's hard sometimes, maybe, like, especially with smartphones, you sometimes forget between, one account versus another, and you can slip. But sometimes there's a really nice erase button to get rid of those messages, but I think for the most part, you just got to be really extra conscious about how you're projecting. And I think this is like, no matter what the tool, even in person, you have to monitor what what you're saying. Is it appropriate for the audience or the individual that you're talking to? And just to think about it that way. The tools are just right nowadays are just so fast to do all that stuff. And so being extra conscious of that is, I think, important. But as I said, you don't want to be you don't want to be managing too many identities. Otherwise, also too, it'll drive anyone nuts if you have to monitor that many identities out in the digital world.
Hmm.
And I did bring this up with Jenna last night, but I also want to note something of importance recently. Because of the way, um, when the way social media is, your presence has an echo out there. There are some, whether it's pictures or anything, there's a presence out there about you. And the reason why also I think that things like inventory are important is, in case of things happen to you in real life, and by that I mean, should you perish or should you drop off the face of the earth, that um, your digital identity is perpetuated for a long, long time. Um, and you always want to make sure that other people, those who are close to you, are aware of where that information and identity is. Just because it's a very interesting phenomenon. But I've actually had this instance with a few of my former students of, that they have passed, but that their videos and their pictures and everything are still present in the social media world. And so you want to make sure you have somebody to help you pull that stuff down or collect that stuff, in case something should happen.
All right, we have one more question, actually two, but I'll make it into one. One from Diane. She would like to know a little bit more about how um, to link the transitions in your career path from the perspective of a personal brand. So, if you're
Mm.
transitioning into a new sector, how do you start to build um, that online resume? there.
Mm,
And then Ty wanted to know if you could recommend just one book to help in this process. The number one book. What would you have to say?
mm. So I guess for the first one, I'm really big onto like designing mind maps and thinking and reflecting about my career path. And I give a career speech kind of once a semester here at the university, and I reflect about kind of when thinking about the transitions you make, what are the essentials about you that you're still carrying on to the next one, and why did you know maybe the content may have changed or the field may have changed, but there's something implicit about you that why you got picked for um, that next step. And so by that, with the map I always present to students is that I've always had two drives. One is education, and the other was in the environment. And those are two core things that have kind of no matter where I've transitioned in terms of fields, I went from being an outdoor educator to an environmental educator to um, experiential educator to basically then working in the campus sustainability field, and they all have different connections. And so it appeals to me because of the education as well as the environment. And then the other part was, when the reason why I believe I got hired is because of my organizational skills and my ability to one of my catchphrase I say to people is and because I started to realize this was that I'm an organizational cleaner, and by that I usually have stepped into organizations where they're just either starting or just trying to figure things out, and or they're in chaos and basically taking all of their kind of budgetary red into making it black and creating systems. And I feel that that's characteristically why I've entered into all my different positions, other than my core interests as well as kind of my skill level. So when you're communicating your brand, you gotta, I think, reflect about what were your jobs and what did you um, you know what is it about you that keeps on getting picked, right? Why do people pick you for a particular job? And think about the circumstance. And you'll come down to a few catchphrases and things about why they do so. In terms of books, I guess um, I've been reading a whole bunch, but I actually did think that the article about by Tom Peters is a really good start. It's a really good way to kind of think about how designing your brand and basically uh, your pitch about yourself. But I also think I'm just gonna go back. Hopefully, I can go back one here. A recent book I thought was really interesting was the what was it here? Is branding yourself. It's a recent book in this that came out this year, and they go through more of the detailed stuff in terms of the digital um, presentation that you do about yourself. But the other books are pretty good. And then if you Google personal branding, you'll find so many different articles. But all the principles are actually also the other thing I would do is if you just want this a really a quick run through is to do personal branding infographics and just type that in and then click on images in Google and you'll find some really cool infographics that summarize personal branding.
Mieko, we had one last question that I think was is an interesting one
Sure.
to finish up, and then we really will
Yeah.
wrap up. So Laura asks if you could talk a little bit more about the negative aspects of projecting ourselves digitally
Uh,
and online, so such as stalking or some of the.
mm,
So it's a
right.
how do we
Yeah.
protect ourselves when we're out there in the digital world?
Um, Yeah, I think that about that a lot, more particularly actually for the students I work with. Um, Really, I think it's really about trying to have a consistent message about yourself such that it's pretty ironclad and that's what people will find about you. Um, you know, you know, whether it's digital or not, I mean, people are bound to try to look, do some reputational damage. And so um, I think it's a matter of just trying being you is important, and being and not and as Jenna was saying earlier, is not branding yourself is not about projecting who you are not, or it's about who you are, and being consistent about expressing who you are. I think where the challenges for young adults nowadays is that they are still trying to figure out their identity, and by using these tools, they're not necessarily um, understanding how they're projecting or how they're doing what they're doing to others, and when they're reviewing each other's work, looking at other people's profiles. So um, I think as people mature and become a little bit more assured about their identity, or are figuring out their identity, I think is just keeping it consistent, as well as I just said, monitoring and doing, ignoring some of the noise. And at some point, you do have to ignore the noise, and there could be a lot or there could be a little, and it's just your choice.
Great. Well, I just really wanted to thank Mieko. She is a walking encyclopedia when it comes to this stuff. And if you have additional questions for Mieko, feel free to send them along, and we'll try and get some answers to you. Also wanted to let everyone know that this webinar will be posted on the ELP website. So we encourage people to share. And also that the webinar series continues. This is a service that we provide year-round, free webinars to the public. Our next webinar is coming up on May 8th. It's going to be with ELP Senior Fellow Sean Dixon, who is a coastal policy attorney at Clean Ocean Action, and Margaret Waldock, an environmental program director at the Geraldine Dodge Foundation. They'll be talking about the Sandy response and recovery. But I wanted to again thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you at the next webinar. Thanks, Mieko.
Thanks. Thanks.